Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. I have been in the interview business for a long time, and I keep count. I'm over 25,000 one-on-ones now. And whenever I'm asked, I'm often asked, what are the most memorable? I always have a top five, and always in that top five is Richard Dreyfuss, Academy Award-winning author and just a wonderful guy, though he's wrong about a lot of stuff. Richard Dreyfuss is the only guy for whom I've ever ran out of tape. He came over to KCET in the 90s and back in the days of videotape, and we ran out of 3.5 hours of tape. We had to stop talking because he's a red diaper baby, but he's a smart one. Now he's got a book out, One Thought Scares Me, which is 100% great in half of it and 100% wrong in half of it. But that makes for a great conversation. Richard Dreyfuss, welcome to the Hugh Hewitt Show, and congratulations on One Thought Scares Me.
Which half is wrong?
I've been teaching con law for 27 years, and you're wrong on Citizens United. And I love public charter schools, and I want you to go down to the Orange County Classical Academy, which has a waiting list of 800 people in Orange County. Visit what a charter can do, see what the good ones do, and change your mind a little bit, because we are in agreement on the crucial need for civics renewal. But if I told you anything, if I sent you a letter about how to act or how to write screenplays, because I'd read Save the Cat, and I've interviewed Oliver Stone and Sidney Pollack and you, would you listen to me since I'm not an actor?
Yes, because I know you and I think that you're a creative mind.
Well, I listen to you because I know you and I know you're a very smart actor. But boy, are you wrong on Citizens United. And I know the professor you quote here, Professor Winkler's a good guy and all that, but he's just wrong.
What is right about Citizens United?
It is an absolutist First Amendment position obliged by the Constitution, absent amendment. And the overturning of the Austin decision and the McConnell decisions were the right things to do. And it's explained in the concurrence by the Chief Justice, who I've worked with since the mid-'80s. And so we're just not going to agree on it, Richard. So let's talk about what we agree on.
No, I'm with you, pal. I really do. And as a matter of fact, I was going to bring up that word, agreed, that's something we should all be emphasizing. And I have no problem with that. I do have a problem with anyone who ends up creating an excuse for anonymous and enormous amounts of money. And that I will hold anyone, whether it's a justice or a party person, I will hold their feet to a fire if they try to make that acceptable.
You know, we just had Senator Tillis on talking about Sheldon Whitehouse and dark money. And the fact is there's dark money everywhere. You can't get money out of politics. It's like getting talent out of acting, Richard. It doesn't work. You got to have money in politics. I think what Justice O'Connor said to you, if I recall right, from One Thought Scares Me, what's wrong with money? And you two just agreed to disagree.
Well, it's because money has become the driving force without a doubt, and it does cut off, I would say, upwards of 90% of the people in the country who might want to pursue a career in politics. They have to have a connection to enormous amounts of money, and that money has to be done through party, has to be done through obligations and favors, and the guy who's thinking to have a political career is already deeply surrounded by obligations that he doesn't, none of us should want.
Well, look, I agree with part of that, but it's not about civics. And so let's come back to that, because this is, I hope, the first of many conversations about civics.
You and I will end up agreeing to disagree on this, but it's all about civics. And money has replaced thoughtfulness, and it has replaced any impulse for public service other than something that is self-serving.
There are still good people in government, and there are still good people in elected office, but the talent pool is getting thin because we're not teaching. And I think this is the central premise of it. The thought, One Thought Scares Me, your new book, is that if you don't put civics in the water from K through 12, you're not going to have an educated citizenry in a position to govern itself. Is that a fair summary, Richard?
Absolutely.
And I want to be your Mrs. Palmer on First Amendment stuff, but let's have you tell people why they need to buy One Thought Scares Me and get civics back into the water of both public and private education.
Okay. One reason, and I'm not going to say it's first and second and third, but one major reason is that the obligation of a politician to his constituency has been replaced by his obligation to his party fellow member who sits next to him in the chamber, and his obligation as a party person outweighs his obligation to his constitution. And,
all right, hold on that thought. We're going to take our quick break and come back up. I'm going to talk to Richard Dreyfuss for a lot longer about One Thought Scares Me, his brand new bestseller. I think it's number 6 at Amazon or something like that. One Thought Scares Me should be read by everyone. Wholeheartedly embrace the first half. Be a little skeptical, a lot skeptical of the second half, but go get it and come back for the second part of our conversation. One Thought Scares Me. We teach our children what we wish them to know. We don't teach our children what we don't wish them to know. By Richard Dreyfuss. It's fascinating. Stay tuned, America. I'll be back tomorrow. I am back now with Richard Dreyfuss talking about his brand new bestseller, One Thought Scares Me. Key line. By the way, you have 2 federal judges for cousins? That's wild.
yeah, one is at Harvard Law. Well, actually, I met him at Harvard, but they're both on the level of right below the Supreme Court. One is in Boston and the other is in New York.
Okay, First Circuit, Second Circuit. That's something, Richard. You ought to talk about Citizens United with them. I want to quote, though, teaching civics is not a partisan thing, more amenable for one party than another. Page 62. Amen, amen, amen. When did it become partisan?
Let's stop there just to say one thing. We have been told for the past, 15 years, 10 years, 20 years, that we don't agree on anything and that we have 2 separate Americas, blue and red and blah, blah, blah. And in fact, we do agree on one basic, huge, important thing, which is the teaching of civics and the necessity to understand civics as a member of the public body. And that has been forgotten, and to the point that no one thinks we agree on anything. If we agree, though, on civics, that's a huge thing to publicize. It's a huge thing to get everyone to use that word, and we'll stop so grossly overestimating the ability of our public to understand things. And it's an amazing look. People overlook this incredibly important agreement that no one disagrees. I have spoken in front of a serious, somewhere over 210, 220,000 people, and I have never had one person who disagrees. And I've had audiences that are left, right, up, down, fat, thin, and no one. I have watched outrage grow on the faces of my audience, and I've watched it disappear before they get to their cars. And I think it's important. One of the reasons why you and I are talking now is because regardless of people's assumptions about my politics, and most people misunderstanding me automatically assume that I'm a liberal, I'm talking to an almost 100% amount of conservative hosts, and they all agree.
That's because we get the Constitution. and we get how important it is. And we understand 1776. And I understand teachers like Mrs. Palmer. My kids, when they were in public school, by the way, all of them went to public school for 12 years, had a wonderful civics teacher, AP, 12th grade, and she was there, Mrs. Palmer, because she was a lefty and right there growing up in a conservative household. And I would send notes back and forth like your mom and Mrs. Palmer would exchange notes through little Richard Dreyfuss. And I laughed. But Richard, do you know the last time I was addressed Harvard Westlake School, they sent around a permission slip. The kids had to get the permission of their parents to attend my lecture. You know, I'm not exactly a radical right-wing, wild-eyed guy, and that's weird. I really do think public schools and private schools both have just got to dial it back and teach the basics.
You and I should make an understanding together that which is the basis of the most important agreement we could have, that's universal. It acts on both parties. It acts as the glue that keeps Republicans and Democrats together, and not one party is guilty of a gross violation of those kinds of things. I know there was a woman who walked into one of the public schools in Southern California and said, "I don't want my children exposed to opposing views." And the local idiot principal actually canceled the debate. And that was about as dumb and self-destructive as you can get. So
Richard Dreyfuss.
Here's what you will never hear me do. I will take a partisan side and say, as you hear every day, the Republicans are crazy or the Democrats are nuts. No. Everyone is equally insane here, and especially among the public officials. They buy into the fact that they think they're the boss when they're not, and they should be reminded of it far more than every 4 or 6 years. And voting is not the emblem of a good citizen. Informed voting is one of the emblems of an informed citizen, but not just the fact that you vote, because that way you're a patsy from the beginning.
That's the 100% agreement part. Now, I want people to remember, Richard Dreyfuss played the role of Stephen Douglas in the recreation of the Lincoln-Douglas debates. Yeah. Maybe the best 21-hour audio book you can buy, because David Strathairn and you're fabulous in that, by the way. How many hours did that take to do?
About 21.
You just sat down and did a cold read with no pickups?
There were no pickups. I don't remember any pickups. I do remember, though, that I, on my own, had done a great deal of research into Douglas and the Democratic Party's positions at the time. And that's why I couldn't argue that they didn't ask me to play Lincoln, because everyone has a picture both of Lincoln and of me, and it doesn't one doesn't marry with the other. If you've not read it, though, I would say Harold Holzer's book about the speech that made him president was the speech that he was invited to do when New York
Cooper Union. Yep.
And that book is just, you not only have a vivid picture of this seemingly grotesque physical specimen, but you see that in audience after audience all over the country, he had 10 minutes of people staring at him in disgust. And then 10 minutes later, they thought that they were watching St. Paul.
That is why I like Steven Spielberg. I make my law students watch Lincoln because you can be in his presence for 2 hours with Daniel Day-Lewis. But if you want to hear Lincoln and Douglas do the debate, it's really a work of art, Richard. I don't know how often people bring this up to you. We refer to it a lot on this show, and I've played little bits within the copyright rules because I want everyone to listen to those 21 hours. They're just fabulous. 1 hour by Lincoln, an hour and a half by Douglas, a half hour by Lincoln, or the reverse, 7 times in 1858. And it's everything you need to know about why slavery was wrong and could not be extended into territories. And yet Stephen Douglas was a very smart guy, right?
Right. And unfortunately, he was a smart guy who was bound by the limitations of his time and place. And he was facing a man who had somehow risen above the local biases of his time. And he didn't get rid of them, actually, until he was deep into his presidency. But, you know, the story that I love is that at his inauguration, it was Douglas who held his hat. And that, to me, it tells a lot about the two of them, and it tells a lot about America.
Or what America was. I have a new book on my shelf. In fact, Steve Inskeep from NPR has written a new book about Lincoln. I rarely read new books about Lincoln, but I'm going to read that one. Let's go back to your book, Richard, because I want people to get One Thought Scares Me. How are the charter schools reacting? Because you're their friend until you're not in this book. And I don't want them not to read the book. I want them to argue with you. That's why I want you to visit the Orange County Classical Academy. I want you to go see it working.
I want to see it working too, because the person who was trying to persuade me otherwise was talking strictly about the charter schools in New York State. And I know that there's a lot more to charter schools than New York State. And I know that human nature being what it is, that there are people who defend charter schools in the same manner they accuse others of defending public schools, which is by lying. And they lie just as much as the kids who take.
I defend excellence. If you go down to Orange County Classical Academy, the second graders will stand up and recite in unison the preamble to the Constitution. And it's very, very diverse, very not political, and it's the new wave. And I want you to get involved with that. But what were you doing with Justice O'Connor? Were you part of her Civics Initiative?
How is it paid? Are people being asked to pay either twice as much so that they keep their foot in the responsibilities of the public system, or are they are we fooling ourselves and getting some districts are getting 2 schools for the price of 1? If the charter schools are so great, then everyone should be in a charter school. But there's no impulse to create that world, and it should happen if it's called for. What's not being called for is content excellence, teaching excellence, and teachers being compensated in some manner that gives them an even chance of affecting the moral habits of their students.
You and I stop right. We 100% agree on that, which is excellence. The way you act, the way I hopefully interview, excellence wins. It doesn't matter if it's public or private or secular or sectarian, excellence wins. And our children don't get excellent. I had Ron Karenbauer, you had Mrs. Palmer. You don't end up interested in politics unless somebody puts it into you.
That's right. That's right. And we grew up at a time when we knew and took for granted that our teachers were second only to certain parents in their power of shaping the moral character of their children, of their students. And to have them belittled and demeaned as sly cheaters is disgraceful. And
no one gets away with that here. I love teachers. I'm not a big fan of Randy Weingarten, but I love teachers. I don't like teachers' unions, but I love teachers. Richard, I want to give you the last minute of this. This is the first of many conversations because we've got to get this center stage for both parties. And One Thought Scares Me is doing very well. Are you surprised, by the way, how well it's doing?
It's doing, I don't think you can do better on Amazon. It's number one in all categories for bestseller, and it is officially now a bestseller on Amazon. And I cannot wait to speak to friends of mine who I went to high school with, who are now big shots in New York publishing, and I want to call them and say, you made a mistake.
They always do. It's sort of like, what is it William Goldman said, nobody knows nothing? Publishing doesn't know nothing, Richard Dreyfuss.
Yeah, and let me say, I don't know that you. I know that you don't know this. I wanted to do your show because I read an interview with you in which you said what you said at the opening of today's show, which was that I was one of the best interviews you'd ever had.
Oh, it's easy. I'm glad you read that. I don't know. You might not even remember. It went on forever. We ran out of tape, Richard. We ran out of tape.
And I'm telling you, it's so important now for Americans to be reminded of Americans and be reminded of America. In the book, as you know, I refer to this country as America.
Yep.
Unless about all that's bad about it, and that's called the United States of America. And I believe that people don't know the largeness that is in the hearts of the founders and the first generations who came here and redefined government, redefined the generosity that stands behind the Enlightenment. And no government, no matter when or where, ever thought that their job description called for the welfare of the people. And the fact that we have it in this preamble, and we have all these great mythologies that no one knows who wrote it, and it just appeared on the last day. I say, ask anyone from any other country, would you and your government sign this? They're all going to say no. And I say it divides those of us who are mature from those of us who are not. And we have slowly taken over the central part of the definition of education for the entire world. And that is something, that's bragging rights.
It is, and you do, and it is. You brag on America in One Thought Scares Me, and I love that, Richard Dreyfuss. Come back. We'll do another long interview on the book as you get middle of the book tour, and then come back a third time, because I love smart lefties with whom I can agree and disagree civilly. And by the way, civilly is a crucial word in this book.
I'm a smart ex-lefty, and I am, and I say this to every audience, I'm not a liberal. I am a libo, conservo, rado, middle of the roado. Just like most of you, except you haven't given it any thought lately.
Richard, keep coming back. I'm up against the deadline, but my goodness, let's continue the conversation. One Thought Scares Me at Amazon, #1 bestseller right now. Thank you, Richard Dreyfuss. I am never the lesser for talking to you. I'm always more. We are many universal.
I hope
Whitman
you have
said.
my private numbers, and I hope you give me a call soon.
I will indeed. Richard Dreyfuss, be well. Thank you, America.